other people don't have the resources, but how can we make technologies that are going to make more efficient use of those resources and make better decisions about those resources? But we can't do it alone. We were even speaking before lunch about how difficult it is to get all the right people together in a city to make those decisions. So if I think of one word, I would say collaborative. And we all have to win, right? That's part of the equation. How do we have these business models in which we win? But to think that we can all go off and do it in our own box now, those days are over. We can't do that. Competitors are now becoming allies in this process, et cetera. So I see things a little bit different.
I would add to that long-term thinking and long-term measures of profitability. So changing the metric of profitability, which business is the most common measurement, to different business cycles and matching that through long-term thinking rather than measuring it on a really short cycle. I do think it is about breaking down walls. And it's not just about your own industry, but it's about finding other industry partners and looking at competition in a very different manner.
Way.
I think gone are the days of competitive advantage. It has to be, and I support Carrie, it's collaborative advantage and long-term thinking are the key.
Jim?
I think the information technology sector actually does this very well. There's this concept of cooperative competition, where particularly when you're trying to build new markets, it makes a lot of sense to operate in collaboration with your competitors. And this is something that we try to foster as an organisation within the Climate Group. The businesses that we're working with are trying to advance LED lighting by working with city governments on standards, on electric vehicles by working with fleet owners around how can they introduce fleet in an economically effective way. And this is the way I think we're going to see these new markets opening up, is by actually businesses with aligned interests in order to open up the market need to be thinking about collaboration, on developing standards. I think very importantly about presenting a united front to policymakers who are bombarded with messages every day about how to do this. Actually, many of them want to do the right thing, but they need, firstly, the cover of the business sector in order to give them the space to lead, and also ideas around how to design policy. And policies, when they are successful, spread incredibly quickly around the world now. If you look at it, I keep coming back to electric vehicles because we have a program on it, but if you look at national policies on electric vehicles that are being designed now around the world, it's a cookie-cutter approach, actually. There's about a $5,000 incentive for purchases. There's incentives for infrastructure rollout. There's R&D. Yeah. So when someone actually manages to get an announcement through, it's much easier for other policymakers to say, actually, these guys are doing it now. I think this is now serious. We need to get on with it. So that's a part of the diffusion of leadership that we will see.
I would add one more to that, and that's this whole notion of stewardship. I think there's this real sense of meaning at the workplace, meaning in terms of a larger value beyond the financial. So I think a transition from leadership to stewardship, the old notion of stewardship in a different form. So
Ram, let me ask you a question. You've been sort of doing this. Through academia and through your consulting, you have an exposure which is, sort of a combination of meaning both theory and practice. What are you feeling? What's your sense over the last 10 years in either a specific industry or in a specific country?
I'm sorry, what do I see as a difference?
Yeah, do you see a difference?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In the 80s when I was...
what are the challenges and what are the meaning obstacles that you see for this new path?
Yeah, so it goes back to, in the 80s I did a lot of work on strategy, and as you guys know, all the talk was on comparative strategic advantage. That was, Michael Porter was a great guru in that. It's interesting that in the January issue of the Harvard Business Review, Michael Porter, who was the guru of strategy and comparative advantage, had this article on shared value creation, which is actually 2006. And I think that encapsulates the transitions I've been seeing. 80s on strategy, competitive advantage, sustained competitive advantage. And then the realization in the 90s that the importance of collaboration, collaborative networks and so on, strategic networks. And then in this last decade, this really beyond business into and I think natural capitalism was a key player in that. That book, Natural Capitalism, influenced many people. So I see that in the kind of thinking going on in academia. And I have a sort of schizophrenic personality between academia and practice. But I think it's interesting to recognize that the field of strategy is only 50 years old. When we're in it, we think this has been there forever. But in reality, it's only 50 years old, and commerce has been around for a few thousand years. So these transitions take place, these dramatic changes take place without us knowing it. And they take place in a few decades. So I can see something like this for another 50 to 100 years, what we're talking about.
Yeah, but interestingly, you know, if you talk to an economist, most economists think that this whole green thing is a humbug, it's not real, it's not for business, it's not for sustainability as being, it cannot be prolonged.
Yeah. Well, you know,